We'll start up there with the newly cut ones. I'll show them, and we'll do roughly what we did the other day, showing the first year's growth and then moving on to the older stuff. Way back several months ago, we're probably talking December or November it was, we cut down a number of trees in a system called coppicing. Now coppicing is basically where you cut a tree close to the ground, usually leaving a foot or two, that's half a metre or a bit more than that, above the ground for new growth to come. This is a stool of a trunk of a tree here, and this is the new growth which is coming already. This is the first year growth from a stump of a tree which I felled last winter. These will be thinned out this coming winter so that there are only about 6 or 8 of these pieces, which will then concentrate the effort of the tree into those 6 or 8 which I leave on it. The small stumps I leave about 3 or 4, the bigger stumps I will leave 5, 8, sometimes even 10 on the bigger stump. This particular stump, the size of the trunk was about 25 or 30 centimetres. This is one of the medium-sized trees that I coppiced last winter. This will then be on here now, using the amount of effort that the roots are putting in. Remember that the big benefit of coppicing is that you're leaving the roots intact rather than planting a young tree. You've got the rooting system already in place. So that then produces all this amazing amount of growth in a very, very short time. Away it'll go, and this will be coppiced about between 12 and 20 years from now. Whether I'll be here or not, of course, is another matter, especially with this COVID-19 around the place. Who knows? Chap nearly 80 may not be here in 20 years' time, but I'm working at it, and I plan to be. What we need to understand about coppicing is the efficiency of the system in comparison with clear felling and replanting. Coppice will always be dramatically more efficient. These are alders, and I use the timber as fuel for my stoves, which provides me with hot water and heating in the house. A lot of people will misunderstand the fact that if you're burning a piece of wood which has grown, they think that you're putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Well, of course you are whilst you're burning it, but in the meantime, whilst the tree is growing, that will absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So from the point of view of the sustainability and climate change, the method of coppicing is carbon neutral, but there are huge pluses. If you could look at a little twig like this and then the amount of leaves on it, in the winter all those leaves will have fallen to the ground. So over the lifetime of this stump of tree, which will produce logs in 20 years' time, over that lifetime the amount of leaves which drop onto the ground is about equivalent to the same amount of wood as I will cut out next time. So in fact you're putting the leaves back into the ground, which is being carbon positive and enables the ground to recuperate itself with a lot of the minerals which are put back in. And because the burning of the wood is still a carbon neutral system, you've still got overall a big carbon benefit from coppicing trees. Now this again is an alder coppice which was cut 9 years ago, and this is the growth which is on this one stump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, basically 7 fairly substantial pieces of wood now from the one stump. As you can see by the scale of my hand here, this is quite a good size already, and as far as height is concerned, this is now about 10 or 12 meters high. So it's going up and will be bigger again and will start to thicken out more as the next few years go by. As you can see, a lot of the brambles and undergrowth, I just ignore that at this stage of the game, quite simply because there's not enough light coming through here now to enable these to do any damage. These are some trees which I put in about 4 or 5 years ago. This one's a sycamore. This one is again another alder, a young alder, and as you can see, although they're about 5 years old, the amount of growth that comes from them is negligible in comparison with the coppice which was done 5 years ago, which we looked at before. But they will come on extremely well. This was a piece of rough ground which had nothing on it when we arrived here 10 years ago. Part of it I planted straight away with some ash, sycamore, and some elder and alder, and I planted all of these to double the size of this woodland. Eventually it'll be about half an acre, which is about 1/4 of a hectare, and that is more than enough to provide all the heat and all the hot water in the winter for a house with a normal sized average house. Most of our grass mowings go either into making compost, or I cut them and make hay out of them so that I can use the hay in the winter to help the compost, and especially in the hotbed system which we use in the spring. But sometimes if there's a bit of surplus, or if I'm feeling too lazy to walk to the compost heap, I will bring the grass mowings up into the wood and just throw them in here. Now this again creates different environment for different types of wildlife. Lots of little bugs and creepy crawlies of various types will use that as their home for the rest of the summer and probably into the winter. And at the same time, it's rotting down slowly. It's providing shelter for those little creepy crawlies and overwintering areas, and at the same time it will be producing a significant amount of fertility for these young trees. This is an area mostly ash and willow, which I planted within the last 10 years, and they're coming on quite well. Obviously with the ash dieback disease, we're all concerned about how many ash trees are going to be affected and whether the trees will develop a resistance to them. We hope of course that they will, but the important thing is that, in my view, it's important that ash trees are part of a mixed woodland. The big mistake that is often made is that you plant a whole acre or a whole hectare or a whole 10 hectares with the same species of tree. That has to be a mistake in any shape or form. It never occurs in nature that that happens. It's important therefore to have the biodiversity provided by different types of trees all mixed in together. Obviously some types of trees do better in some areas than they do in others, and therefore they will eventually take over, but the vast majority of natural woodlands will be mixed wood with lots of different varieties of timber in the wood, which will then encourage different types of wildlife.